I stepped into the courtroom and caught it, the smirk. Lila tilted her head toward Grayson, lips curled. He didn't look at me, just whispered something behind his hand, and she nodded, amused. They were already seated front row like stars in a play they had written themselves. I kept walking, didn't look left or right. My shoes clicked too loudly on the tile, but I didn't slow down. The clerk gestured toward the defense table. I sat, straight back, hands folded, silent. The judge entered, gavel down, papers shuffled. Probate hearing, the bailiff announced. Grayson Morrell and Lila Morrell versus Inez Morrell. I didn't flinch. I knew the papers. I'd read every line of their petition the night it arrived, delivered by courier, like some urgent invoice of betrayal. Grayson stood. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. Your Honor, we're here today because my mother manipulated my father during his final months. She isolated him, pressured him to change his will. We believe undue influence was involved. Lila dabbed at the corner of her eye, with nothing in it. I stared straight ahead, my name on their mouths like something soiled. The judge squinted at the documents in front of him. Mrs. Morrell, he said, you are listed here as the sole beneficiary of Mr. Robert Morrell's estate. Is that correct? I nodded once. You were also his legal spouse at the time of his passing. Yes. He flipped a page, looked again at Grayson. And you're alleging that she coerced him, while being his wife, into naming her the beneficiary, despite her being the legal trustee already. For nearly a decade, Grayson hesitated. Yes, sir. The judge leaned back, just making sure I understand the claim the plaintiff is accusing the primary beneficiary, who is also the legal trustee of coercion, into receiving what she already legally controlled. The room was quiet. No one laughed. But the smirk returned. Lila's mouth twitched again, like this was all some sitcom punchline. The judge sighed. I'll need to review the trust instruments and medical records submitted. He motioned for both sides to submit their exhibits. Nora Vega, my attorney, stood. Calm, efficient. She placed our folder on the clerk's table and returned without speaking. She didn't need to speak. Not yet. Opposite her, Grayson's lawyer, a man named Carter Denton, looked like he'd been hired for television. Pocket-square cufflinks, perfect gray temples. He rose, handed over their file, and flashed a rehearsed smile at the judge. The judge scanned the contents, then looked back at me. Mrs. Morrell, for the record, did you and Mr. Morrell maintain a joint household throughout your marriage? Yes. Did he ever express fear of you? In writing or to any professionals? No. He jotted something down. All right. We'll recess for today and reconvene Thursday at 10. Documents will be reviewed in the interim. Gavel. Everyone stood. I turned, finally. Grayson met my eyes for a second, then looked past me like I wasn't there, like I'd never been there. Lila fixed her jacket sleeve, whispered again. Her nails tapped her phone before we'd even left the courtroom. Outside, the hallway was cold, sterile. I reached for the wall to steady myself, not because I was weak, but because my fingers wouldn't stop shaking. Nora joined me, walking in silence. She waited until we were outside before speaking. They want a reaction. I said nothing. She added, we won't give them one. I nodded, pulled my coat tighter. Back at home, the mail sat in a neat stack. Junk, mostly. A few condolence cards, and an envelope I didn't recognize, no return address. I opened it, and there it was. The obituary. Printed. Clipped from the paper. Robert's face smiled up at me. His name, his legacy, his family. Except my name wasn't in it. I threw the envelope into the trash, then pulled it back out. My name wasn't there. I read the obituary again to be sure. Robert Allen Morrell, visionary entrepreneur, beloved father and mentor, passed away peacefully surrounded by family. Family. I stopped reading. I'd lived in that man's house for 38 years. Slept beside him, buried his parents, nursed him through his first surgery, built the blueprint firm with him from a folding table in our garage. I wasn't his guest. I was his wife. But according to this clipping, I never existed. Written by Grayson Morrell and family. That's what the line at the bottom said. And I knew Lila wrote it. Every word of it. It had her tone flattering, rehearsed, hollow. All praise, no substance. I folded the paper in half, then in quarters. The edges lined up too neatly. It made me angrier. I unfolded it again and flattened it on the counter. The byline quoted their company bio. Founder of Morrell Development, passionate about legacy, deeply loved by his children and grandchildren. Children, grandchildren, not spouse, not even survived by. I'd seen him write drafts of obituaries before. He always included the spouse first. Always. I walked to the cabinet, took down the tin where we kept old photos, flipped through wedding picture, Christmases, birthdays. Me in all of them, me next to him, me holding Grayson's hand when he broke his collarbone, falling off the trampoline. I laid one photo next to the paper clipping. Robert, grinning. I was beside him, hair pinned back, hand on his shoulder. A real smile. Not for show, not curated for PR. They wanted to rewrite the ending, not just the will, the entire memory of him. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister in Oregon. Just saw the paper. Is this a mistake or... I didn't respond. I poured coffee. Black. No sugar. The mug clinked on the counter. I stared at it too long. My breath felt like it didn't want to stay in my chest. It wasn't grief, not exactly. I'd already cried. At the hospital. At home. In the car. I'd cried watching him fold napkins 2 days before he passed, hands shaking like branches in wind. This was something else. This was rage I wasn't allowed to show. I sat at the table. The obituary beside the coffee. Robert's face looking back. The way he looked after a deal closed, proud, just tired enough, ready to sleep. They cut me out of the narrative. The legacy, the public record. Grayson probably told himself it was cleaner this way. Less messy. That's what he always said when he wanted control. He always did hate when things got too sentimental or complicated. I traced the lines of Robert's name with my finger, then folded the paper one last time and slid it into a drawer. I wouldn't destroy it. Let it stay. Quiet. Filed away. Next to it in the same drawer sat a thin envelope I hadn't touched since the funeral. The one with the key. The one Robert handed me 2 months before he died. I opened the drawer farther and pulled it out. Held it in both hands. The tag on the key said, "For the box, under the floorboard." I opened the package and saw my own handwriting staring back. The frame was mine. I recognized the label on the back, the floral trim. I'd wrapped it in brown paper, tied it with string. I'd even added a note weeks ago. For the mantle thought it belonged there. Now it was back. No note. Just silence. The glass was cracked, jagged through the middle. A fault line across the last photo we took as a family. Robert, me, Grace, and Lila, and the girls at the lake house 2 summers ago. I'd framed it because it was the only one in years where we were all smiling at the same time. I ran my thumb across the fracture. It split Lila clean in half. I picked up the photo. The backing was loose, as if someone had pried it out and shoved it back in. I checked the return label. Typed. Generic. Mailed from their zip code. No message, no explanation. Just a message wrapped in silence. I placed the frame on the counter. The crack caught the light. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was intention. They wanted it out of their house, out of their line of sight. I remembered the day I gave it to them. Lila smiled, politely said, "Oh, thank you, how thoughtful," then handed it to the housekeeper to put somewhere safe. They'd kept it long enough for Robert to pass. then tossed it back like expired food. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I swept the broken glass into the trash and laid the photo on the table. I sat down, looked at it. We looked like a family. We weren't. Not anymore. They'd been slowly cutting me out for years, I just hadn't seen it. Or I'd seen it and made excuses. Told myself they were busy, stressed, focused on the girls, distracted by work. But they had time for the parties, for the fundraisers, for the beach trips I heard about from neighbors. I was only called when something was needed. A check, a contact, a favor at the country club, and still I smiled. Still I baked the pie. Still I framed the picture. The phone rang. I let it ring twice before picking up. Mom Grayson's voice. Tense. Flat. Yes. Did you get something in the mail I did? Silence. It wasn't meant to be rude, he said quickly. Lila just thought, it wasn't appropriate right now. With the legal stuff. I didn't respond. We're under a lot of pressure. The girls have questions, people are talking. It's all very messy. I could hear him pacing, the way he always did when trying to sell a line he barely believed. I know you're upset, he added, but I hope you understand. I do, I said. I understand perfectly. He exhaled, relieved, mistaking my quiet for agreement. Okay. Well, I'll let you go. He hung up first. I stared at the empty line for a moment, then reached into the drawer again. I took out the envelope. The key was still there. And beneath it, folded neatly, was a second note in Robert's handwriting. Floorboard bedroom closet. Left corner. Watch the nails. I pulled out the chair by the kitchen door. It wobbled. The seat card read, Mrs. Morell, but the handwriting was rushed like an afterthought. No one looked up as I sat. The hum of the dishwasher behind me masked every attempt at small talk. The table stretched long and elegant toward the front of the banquet room. White linens, glass centerpieces, name tags with gold print. Family friends. Business partners. Clients. All seated where the lights hit just right. I was in the shadows. Close enough to hear plates clatter in the kitchen, too far to hear the music. Lila glided across the floor in navy chiffon. She stopped mid-room to greet someone with a double air kiss, then motioned toward the stage. Grayson stepped up. I sipped water. It tasted metallic. Thank you all for coming, he began. It means a lot to honor my father this way. He wasn't just a builder, he was a visionary. Applause. He built our company with two things, discipline and purpose. More applause. I kept my eyes on the butter dish. Someone passed it without asking if I wanted any. My father gave us values. He taught us to take risks, to keep our names strong, to invest in people who build legacies. He looked toward his daughters, nodded at Lila. She smiled back like a co-founder. I waited. He didn't say my name. He didn't mention the years I kept the books, wrote the contracts, designed the floor plans while Robert traveled. He didn't mention the mortgage I paid when the first 3 bids fell through, or the time I drove across 3 counties to hand deliver a permit Robert forgot to sign. None of it. He ended with a toast. To Robert Morell, whose blood runs through this company and this family. Glasses clinked. My hands stayed in my lap. Lila walked over with a photographer. She leaned in. We'll get one with you and the girls later, maybe by the fireplace. I nodded. She didn't wait for a reply. The waitstaff brought out steak. Mine was cold. The woman next to me, someone's aunt, maybe whispered, I thought you'd be sitting closer to the front. I smiled. Didn't answer. After dessert, I slipped away. Took the side hallway past the coat check. No one stopped me. No one noticed I was leaving. In the parking lot, my car was blocked in by Grayson's Tesla. I waited in the front seat engine, off fingers clenched tight around the steering wheel. The glove compartment stuck slightly when I opened it. I reached in, pulled out an envelope I kept there for emergencies. Inside a copy of Robert's original trust papers, before they were updated, before everything was consolidated. I knew every line by heart. The next morning, I pulled up the floorboard. I yanked the floorboard up with a flathead screwdriver. The nails were stubborn. My hands didn't shake, they pressed harder. It gave with a snap. The gap revealed a plastic-wrapped box tucked into the dust. Fireproof. Labeled in Robert's writing for Inez. No one else. I pulled it out. Set it on the bedroom rug. Unwrapped it slowly. Inside an envelope thick with folded pages. One flash drive. One key. One business card. His handwriting again on the outside flap. If things get ugly, call Kent. Use this first. I sat on the floor and opened the envelope. First page, a notarized amendment, Robert's signature at the bottom. Not recent, dated 6 years ago. Upon my passing, full discretionary control is to remain with Inez Morel, sole trustee and asset executor, regardless of contest or claim. Second page, a list of asset transfers. Property deeds, copyrights. Banking access, one by one, shifted over the last decade into a private trust. Under my name, quietly, legally, sealed. Third, a copy of power of attorney, durable, final, filed in Massachusetts. Then a flash drive. Labeled in Marker Conversations 2019 to 2022. And finally, the business card. White, crisp, embossed. David Kent, Strategic Wealth Management Private Estate Division Cell, handwritten on the back. Robert's ink. Curved slightly uneven. I folded the pages back and closed the lid. He'd prepared for this. Not just death betrayal. He'd seen what I tried to ignore. The way Grayson flinched when I corrected him. The way Lila introduced me as his mom, but never my mother-in-law. The way they wanted the legacy, but never the work. Robert never said a word. Not directly. But this was everything he never had to say. I got up slowly, knees stiff from the floor. Carried the box downstairs. Set it on the kitchen table. Made coffee. Black. I stared at the clock. 7:42 a.m. Then picked up the phone and dialed the number on the back of the card. It rang twice. This is Kent. This is Inez Morel. Pause. I've been waiting for this call. I met David Kent at a corner office downtown. No receptionist. No waiting room. Just a buzzer and his voice through the speaker. Come in. He looked older. Thinner. The same steel gray hair, just more of it now. We shook hands. No pleasantries. He didn't ask how I'd been. He already knew. He led me to a private meeting room. Closed the door. Sat across from me. Inez, he said, I wondered how long it would take. I placed the box between us, unlocked it, spread the documents out. He didn't flinch, didn't ask why I had them, just nodded. I remember drafting the discretionary clause with Robert, he said. He was very specific. He didn't want ambiguity. He wanted the trust airtight. He never told me. No, that was the point. He slid one document toward himself. Scanned it quickly. This is the final version. Witnessed. Filed through my office but stored offline. No one else has a copy. I watched his face. Robert didn't trust what would happen after he died, I said quietly. No, Kent agreed. Not after Grayson started treating the company like a birthright. And not after Lila began asking questions about the board. He pulled a folder from his briefcase. Thick. Stamped. My name typed on the tab. This is your trust, Inez. Not Robert's. Yours. He started moving assets years ago, incrementally, cleanly. Once the threshold passed a certain mark, the transition completed automatically. I opened the folder. Property deeds, bank authorizations, tax filings, all with my name, not just a will, not just a beneficiary line, ownership. They're suing me, I said. They're suing someone who owns everything they want, Kent replied. And the court doesn't even realize it yet. He leaned forward. The mistake they made was assuming the estate was the battlefield. It's not. You're not in probate court because Robert left you too much. You're there because they think that's all he left. I took a breath, let it sit. They think the will is the fight, I said. It's not, Kent said. The trust is the fortress. They just don't know they're already outside the gates. I leaned back. My fingers felt warm against the wood of the table. What now? I asked. He pulled out another file. We submit nothing yet. Let them build their case. The moment they file financial discovery, we'll be ready. But if you want to move first, there's something else. He handed me a short list of names. 5, maybe 6. Robert had a backup team. People who knew the transition was coming. They can testify if needed. I looked at the names. 2 I recognized. One used to be Robert's assistant. Another was a former attorney we both trusted. Let me guess, I said. They're already expecting this too. Kent smiled. Just a flicker. You married a man who built buildings to last, he said. He built this to outlast even them. He stood. Walked me to the door. Court's in 4 days, I said. I'll be there, he replied. He handed me one more envelope. For your attorney. When it's time. I left with the file tucked under my arm. That night, I called Nora Vega. I opened the envelope Nora dropped on my porch. Grayson's handwriting glared from the cover letter. Statement of position, it read. 6 pages stapled, numbered, underlined. He claimed I was a dependent, not a partner, not a co-founder, not even a spouse of substance. Just someone who benefited passively from Robert's career. I read every word. Twice. The sentences grew colder as they went. She played no active role in company formation. She did not financially invest in the business. She inherited status through marriage, not contribution. Each line stripped me down like I hadn't written the company's first invoices by hand. Like I hadn't slept on a pullout while Robert drove cross-country to pitch clients we couldn't afford to lose. Like I hadn't cashed out my pension from a public school job to pay the first round of legal fees when a land deal fell through. None of that counted now. What counted was his version. He wrote that the company was his father's legacy to the bloodline. That is the only child he had rightful claim to the Morell estate in full. Bloodline. That word stayed in my mouth like iron. I called Nora. We need to prepare a direct response, she said. He's arguing inheritance by lineage. We're going to argue ownership by labor. She asked me to bring everything. Old contracts, emails, anything that showed involvement. I hung up and started digging. I pulled out boxes from the garage. Tax returns. Checks I'd signed. Photos from the first office me in a folding chair reviewing blueprints on the floor. Receipts from supply stores with my initials. Handwritten notes in the margins of client drafts. I kept everything. Not because I expected this, but because Robert and I never let anything go. In a folder marked More Dev 2002, I found a typed contract. My name under project manager. My signature and Robert's. That was the year Grayson dropped out of grad school. The same year I stayed up 3 nights in a row redlining permits while he flew to Hawaii with Lila. She contributed nothing. That's what he wrote. As if I'd been some quiet weight in a nice chair. I drove to Nora's the next morning. Gave her the stack. She didn't say much, just nodded and started scanning. Her office smelled like strong coffee and toner. She pointed to the contract. This, she said, is gold. She slid it into a plastic sleeve. I handed her the envelope Kent gave me. Her eyes scanned the clause, the power of attorney, the trust transfer. She leaned back, whistled once low. They don't know, she said. Not yet. I left the office as the sun dipped behind the courthouse steps. At home, I made dinner for one. Set the plate down. Didn't touch it. They thought I had nothing, that I was nothing without his name. But they never asked how the name was built. The next morning, Nora called. her voice sharper. They just filed a motion, full discovery. They're trying to freeze your accounts. I didn't panic. I opened the drawer, pulled out the second file Robert had marked private. It was time to let the next piece fall. I slid the envelope across the table without opening it. Nora opened it for me. Read it once. Didn't blink. They're offering a settlement, she said flatly. You get to keep the guest house. Monthly stipend. They'll drop the suit if you sign a non-disclosure. I didn't answer. She passed the letter to me. I skimmed the first line. In the interest of preserving family dignity, I folded the letter in half, then in half again. I didn't tear it, didn't speak, just slid it back to Nora. She understood. They think that guest house is a gift, I said. It's yours already, she replied. The next afternoon, Lila called. No greeting, just her voice, syrupy and clipped. I heard you got the offer, she said. I told Grayson you wouldn't take it, but still, he wanted to show good faith. Good faith. I stood in the kitchen, hand resting on the counter. Lila continued. This doesn't have to get ugly, you know. The press doesn't need to get involved. We can all move forward if you just accept your place. I stayed silent. She waited, then added with a laugh under her breath. See? She knows she has no power. I hung up. That night, I made copies of the trust documents. One for Nora, one for the bank, one for the foundation board Robert had chaired for 20 years. I didn't explain anything, just mailed them. Sealed, labeled, sent. No words, no threats, just truth. The next morning, I got a text from Grayson. Can we talk? Just us, I didn't respond. Nora called an hour later. They've added a clause to their motion, trying to paint you as unstable. Let them, I said. She paused. Then we file our response tomorrow. I went to the garage, pulled down the last storage bin. Inside, old ledgers, handwritten notes, drafts with Robert's markings in pen, my handwriting beside his. I set them in order, labeled them by year, let them keep guessing. They thought silence was surrender, but they never understood the difference between stillness and waiting. The court date was now 3 days away. I boiled water, made coffee, sat in the quiet. Then I took the flash drive from the box under the floorboard, plugged it in, and pressed play. I dialed the number from memory. It rang twice. Jean Adler, the voice answered. It's Inez Morel. A pause, then a low breath. Inez. Damn. I wondered if I'd hear from you. I need something. From the early days. He didn't ask why. I've still got boxes in storage. I kept all the filings, the original joint ownership documents, blueprints, patent applications. You were on half of them. I know, I said. But now I need proof. He didn't hesitate. I'll find them. 2 hours later, he sent scans. Dated, signed. Joint application forms with both our names. Founding documents from the first LLC before Morel Development even had a real office. One patent registered in both our names for a modular building design Robert and I sketched on a napkin after midnight in 1998. I always knew they'd try to rewrite you out, Jean said on the phone. Robert didn't, though. He made sure you stayed in it. They're saying I contributed nothing. Jean snorted. They weren't there when you and I held up drywall in the prototype units. I smiled. First time in days. He paused. Do you want me to testify? I might. I will. I forwarded the documents to Nora that night. She called 20 minutes later. These change everything. They just confirm what was already true. I boxed up the originals and sealed the folder. Labeled it in pen, Chicago Proof. I pulled out Robert's ledger again. The one from the trust box. Page by page, it mapped the shift, how quietly he moved everything, how carefully he placed each transfer. Some dated years back, some recent. But each one layered, built for protection, not just succession. He didn't leave me the empire. He made me the architect of its second life. I poured coffee. It had gone cold. On the screen, Gene's email lit up again. By the way, he wrote, "Check the line item on the 2001 bank transfer. I think you'll like what it says." I opened the file again, scrolled to the line. Account owner Inez Morel. Authorized signatory, Robert A. Morel. Memo startup funding. Her design, her risk, her name. I shut the laptop slowly, folded the paper next to it. The doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. It was Nora, file in hand. Face calm, but her eyes were sharper. "They just moved to freeze the foundation account," she said. I stepped back. "Let her in." "Then it's time I said." "Let them come." I opened the second envelope Kent had handed me. Thicker than the first. Inside one clause. No fluff. No room for misinterpretation. Private irrevocable trust. Established March 14, 2015. Grantor Robert A. Morel. Trustee Inez J. Morel. Beneficiaries none. The trigger clause was simple. Effective upon death of grantor, full and immediate transfer of all protected assets to trustee. No contest permitted, not subject to probate. I read it 3 times. Then again, my heart didn't race. My hands didn't tremble. I just knew. Robert hadn't just written me into his will. He'd written them out of everything else. Real estate, corporate holdings, licensing rights, royalties, insurance, savings, foundations. All of it moved under the trust. Quietly, irrevocably, legally. 8 years ago, I picked up the phone and called Nora. She answered on the first ring. "It's done," I said. "He moved it all." The trust transferred on the day he died. She didn't speak for a moment. "You're not just the widow," she said. "I'm the legal owner. And they're suing you like you're still a dependent." I exhaled. It felt like stone leaving my chest. "I'll draft the formal notice to the court," she said. "They're not in probate court anymore. They're in violation." The next morning, I walked into the bank. I handed the trust clause to the estate officer. Watched his face as he scanned the document. "I need access to the primary trust accounts," I said, "and a freeze on all pending withdrawals or third-party claims." He looked at me differently then. "Of course, Mrs. Morel. Right away." I signed the forms, walked out with new access credentials, routing information, full control. No lawyer from their side had this. No judge had seen it yet. Not until now. Nora met me in her office 2 hours later. She already had the court filing prepared. We sat side by side as she uploaded it. Statement of fact. No drama. The petitioners are attempting to sue the sole independent trustee of an irrevocable private trust. Assets under dispute are no longer part of the probate estate. She clicked submit. "They'll lose their minds," she said. "They'll lose their case," I replied. We didn't toast, didn't smile, just packed the folder and waited. Because now it wasn't about damage control or begging for dignity. It was about watching them realize they'd brought a match to a vault. I signed the retainer without hesitation. Nora didn't waste time. She reviewed the documents again, one by one, each paper laid out like tiles on a chessboard. Her pen tapped softly as she read. No small talk, no comfort, just precision. "This," she said, pointing to the irrevocable clause, "is the hammer. But we won't swing it yet." She flipped the page. "We let them get confident. Let them assume you're still reacting. Then we strike once." She looked up, "And we don't flinch." I nodded. She pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote 5 names. "Witnesses," she said. "I'm building a narrative, not just a defense. People who saw you in the business in meetings on site, not just as a wife, but as a partner. Start with Gene Adler," I said. "He kept everything. I already called him. He's on board." She jotted notes. 1 name per line. Her handwriting was neat, almost architectural. "I'll reach out to the CPA from 2004, she continued. The one who signed off on the joint tax filings when you and Robert listed as co-executives. She looked up again. They won't expect this. They expect I'll fold, I said. They expect a widow, she replied, not an owner. She reached for her tablet, pulled up court calendars, and made a few quick adjustments. They've set the next hearing for Tuesday morning. I'll file for protective status on the trust before then, but we're also going to file a preemptive motion one that forces them to justify their claim with specific damages. Won't they stall? I asked. They'll try. But you're not suing them. They're suing you. And if we prove their claims are baseless, malicious, or manipulative, we file for dismissal with prejudice, meaning they couldn't refile, couldn't regroup. It would be over. She paused. Do you want to counter? I thought for a second. No. You sure? Yes, I said. I want the record to show I never came for them. They came for me. She nodded once, approving. I've seen families collapse over less, she said, but I've also seen them burn down the wrong house. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. They just filed another statement, she said. This time accusing you of forging Robert's signature. I didn't react. Nora smiled. Perfect, she said. They just handed us their timeline. She picked up her phone. Dialed fast. Call came in, she said to her paralegal. Flag it. Add it to the strategy file. And pull the notarization records from the original clause. We're going to drown them in their own fiction. She hung up. Turned to me. Inez, this is going to get louder. I can handle loud, I said. She smiled again, smaller this time. Approval, not pity. I'll see you in court Monday morning. Wear whatever you wore the last time they underestimated you. I left her office with a copy of the file in my bag. The courthouse steps didn't feel as heavy that evening. I parked, walked past them once slowly, then turned back toward home. At the mailbox, I found a handwritten envelope with no return address. Inside, a single typed line. You don't belong in that seat. No name, no signature. I folded it, slid it next to the trust papers in my drawer, then opened the file labeled Witness Eero 2 and started making my list. I walked into the bank at 9:01 a.m. No small talk, no coffee. Just the folder in my hand and the trust clause inside. I asked for the senior officer by name. He came out quickly, eyes already scanning the documents as I laid them flat on his desk. These are the transfers, I said. Robert filed them years ago. These are the signatures. And here this clause makes me the sole legal trustee. He read silently. No interruption. When he got to the final page, his expression changed. Do you know who's been accessing the account? I do, I said. Grayson Morrell. He tapped his pen, once then opened his laptop. He's listed as a business continuity contact. Temporary by Robert's instruction years ago, but that authorization was never renewed. He's been using it like it's his own, I said. The officer clicked, scrolled, frowned. He wired a contractor $40,000 last week, he muttered. Another $12,000 for consulting fees. Do you recognize the recipient? His wife? He kept scrolling. His jaw tensed. I slid another document forward. This is a summary of all unauthorized withdrawals since the day Robert died. He checked it against the internal log. Matched line by line. Then he looked up. Would you like us to freeze the account? No, I said. I want you to freeze it. You have legal grounds. He's operating outside of any formal authority. He nodded once, picked up the phone. Quiet words to someone in compliance. By the time I left the office, the account was locked. Grayson wouldn't know yet, but his card would fail the next time he swiped it. By 2:00 p.m., I had 2 missed calls. By 3:00, 5 texts. Mom, what the hell is going on? I need access. This is temporary, right? You're being dramatic. This wasn't your role. I didn't answer. By dinner time, Nora called. They just sent an emergency filing. Want the freeze lifted. Claimed financial hardship. I didn't laugh, but I wanted to. They said the business is suffering, she added. that you're jeopardizing employees and clients by holding what isn't yours. It's not just mine, I said. It was never theirs. She paused. We'll let the judge read the trust tomorrow, she said. Let the words speak for themselves. I hung up. Sat at the kitchen table. Outside, it started to rain. The power didn't shift in a flash. It moved slowly, quietly, like water seeping through foundation cracks. I opened the ledger again, found the page Robert had marked final balance. I underlined the entry with a red pen, then reached for the next file marked trial evidence, financial. Sorted each receipt, each transfer, each timestamp. At 7:12 p.m., my phone buzzed again. You didn't have to go this far, Grayson wrote. I was just trying to hold it together. I stared at the message, then typed one line back. You were never holding it. You were spending it. I hit send and turned off the phone. Then I reached for the folder labeled Foundation Grants, Year 1, and began highlighting. I opened the door and found Lila smiling with roses. Thought you could use a little color, she said, voice-soft coat, draped perfectly over one shoulder. I stepped aside without a word. She walked in like it was her house, the way she used to. Light steps. Fake warmth. She looked around. Still smells like coffee and pine in here. I love that about your place. So cozy. I nodded. She placed the flowers on the counter, peeled off her gloves, slowly looked at me like we were friends. I was just thinking, she said, with everything going on, it doesn't have to be cold, right? We're family. Grief makes people act weird. We've all said things we didn't mean. She didn't mention the court. She didn't mention the bank account. She didn't mention the settlement letter. She just smiled. I'm making coffee, I said. She perked up. Perfect. I'd love a cup. I poured 2. No cream, no sugar. Handed hers over in the plain white mug with the old company logo. She didn't notice. I've been meaning to say, she went on. I always admired how poised you were at the funeral. So elegant, even with everything happening so fast. I sat down. Let her talk. Grayson's been under a lot of pressure, she said. The girls, too. And I think maybe it just snowballed. You know, misunderstandings, miscommunication, so much legal language and papers flying around. Still smiling, still sweet. She sipped. Anyway, I just thought it might help if we touched base. Woman to woman, mother to daughter-in-law. I leaned back. Her earrings caught the light. Her eyes scanned the room again. She was searching for papers, for evidence, for weakness. She wouldn't find any. I took a slow sip, waited. She finally set the mug down and tried one more angle. I know you've got your own team now, but if we just talk this through like adults, I think there's a way to keep the family intact. No more lawyers, no more filings. Just a real conversation. I met her eyes. Said nothing. She folded her hands in her lap. You're so quiet, she said. That's always been your strength, hasn't it? She smiled again, but this time it faltered. Just slightly. Then she stood. I should get going. I wanted to say you still matter, no matter what the lawyers say. That doesn't change who you are to us. I walked her to the door. She turned back before stepping outside. Grayson's trying. He really is. Just keep that in mind, okay? I nodded once, closed the door behind her, then poured her untouched coffee down the sink. I pulled the file marked Foundation Misuse, 2021, events from the drawer, and slid a Post-it onto the first receipt with her signature on it. Pink, cursive, perfect loops. $18,500. Event coordinator. Private estate dinner. Date matched the night Robert had gone to the hospital. They thought I forgot. They thought I wouldn't remember how snakes bite. I walked in through the service entrance. My name was on the guest list, but not near the podium, not even near family. They seated me at the back by the AV cables and folding chairs with a printed card that read, Media Overflow. I didn't complain. Lila floated past in silver. Grayson trailed her shaking hands, laughing with someone from the local paper. A slideshow played behind them. Robert in hard hats. Ribbon cuttings, fake candids of family moments that cropped me out like a bad edit. They were collecting checks. Calling it the Morel Vision Fund, Lila leaned into the mic. Robert believed in strong beginnings. Tonight, we honor that spirit. More applause. Camera flashes. No mention of the lawsuits. No mention of the trust. Just curated grief washed in champagne and ego. I watched. They served salmon and champagne to the front rows. My table got coffee in cardboard cups. One woman whispered, "I thought she was the wife." Another shrugged. Grayson gave a toast. Said Robert had taught him everything. Said Robert believed in legacy blood responsibility. They used every word except truth. I didn't eat. I didn't clap. The room buzzed with donation pledges. Lila posed with a real estate developer. Grayson introduced himself to someone from the governor's office like he was the heir to a crown. They passed out gift bags stamped with the new Morel crest, designed last month. The old logo, the one I drew on a napkin nowhere in sight. Then the lights dimmed for a tribute video. I stood. Walked the long way around the banquet hall. No one noticed. Or if they did, they looked away. Outside, the air felt honest, cold, sharp. I took the long steps down toward the parking lot and didn't stop until I reached my car. Inside, I sat for a while. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I took out my phone, opened the photos folder, scrolled to the old office sketch, the original layout I'd drafted in '98. I emailed it to Nora with a timestamp and a caption, "Include this in Exhibit C." They left the architect out of the story. Then I opened the next folder, one marked Video Archives. Found the clip Robert had filmed a year before his diagnosis. His voice clear. His face thinner, but still him. Inez built the foundation, he said. Not just of the company, but of the life I stood on. If I go first, make sure they remember that. And if they don't remind them, I hit save, then hit forward. Sent it to 3 people, the estate judge, the foundation board, and the paper that covered the fundraiser. No comment. No subject line, just truth, delivered in silence. Then I started the car and drove home. I laid the folder on the table. Nora stood crisp and steady, her heels clicking once as she moved to the bench. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Your Honor, defense submits Exhibits A through G," she said. "Founding documents, joint patents, corporate ledgers, tax returns, and the irrevocable trust executed 8 years prior to Mr. Morel's passing." She handed the clerk the binder. Each page in order. Each tab marked. No theatrics. Grayson shifted in his seat. Lila leaned close, whispering. Their lawyer cleared his throat, tried to look unbothered. The judge began flipping through the binder, slowly, deliberately. The sound of pages turning filled the room, each rustle louder than the last. When he reached the clause, he stopped. The room stilled. "This," the judge said, adjusting his glasses, "establishes sole authority. Transfer immediate upon death. No contest provision included." He looked up, directly at them. This lawsuit should never have made it this far. Gasps broke across the benches. Murmurs spread like static. Reporters bent over their pads, pens scratching fast. Grayson's face drained. Lila pressed her lips together until they blanched. Their lawyer sputtered. "Your Honor, surely there's room for," the judge cut him off with a hand. "Room for nothing. The law is plain." Silence followed. Heavy, unyielding. Only the tick of the courtroom clock dared move. I sat still, my hands folded, not triumphant, not gloating, just steady. The judge closed the binder. "I will recess before ruling, But unless opposing counsel can produce material evidence contradicting these documents, I see no legal grounds for continuation. He tapped the trust clause once with his pen, and no credibility in claims of undue influence. He rose. The bailiff called recess. People exhaled all at once. The reporters rushed for the door. Cameras flashed. Questions flew in whispers. I stayed seated. Nora leaned toward me. "That was it," she said softly. "That was the break." I nodded. My eyes never left the folder. Because while the room buzzed, I knew the silence had just begun. I checked the foundation website first thing that morning. Their names were gone. No trustee listing. No glossy photos. No Morell family legacy. Just a blank sidebar where their profiles had been. By noon, the news confirmed it. Their lawyer had withdrawn. Filed a notice of termination of counsel. No explanation. Nora sent me the link with a single line. "They're running out of air." The courthouse calendar still listed a final ruling date, but it no longer mattered. The weight had shifted. Everyone could feel it. Reporters stopped calling me. They wanted Grayson and Lila, but neither of them picked up. No statements, no appearances, no social media. Silence. It wasn't peace, it was absence. A vacuum where their noise used to live. Neighbors noticed. "Haven't seen the kids around," one said at the grocery store. "Hope everything's all right." I just nodded. The truth was simple, they were hiding. When people who build their lives on showmanship go quiet, it isn't by choice. It's survival. I poured coffee that night and sat with the files spread on the table. Not to gloat, just to remind myself how close it had been. One signature out of place, one missing clause, and they could have buried me. Instead, they buried themselves. The next morning, the mail came. Thick envelopes, each addressed to Robert's Foundation. Donation checks. Notes from community members. "We stand with the vision he built. Thank you for protecting his work." None were addressed to Grayson. None to Lila. Their absence had become public, noticeable. People had moved on without them. I didn't celebrate. I simply gathered the envelopes, stacked them neatly, and placed them in the safe. The house was quiet. Not the silence of defeat. The silence of ground settling after an earthquake. I closed the safe, picked up the next folder labeled Final Motions, and slid it into my bag. The letter arrived on a Friday. Cream envelope. Heavy stock. No lawyer's header. No official seal. Just my name typed. Nothing else. I opened it at the kitchen table. "We'd like to reconcile privately. For the sake of the family. For Robert's memory. Let's talk not through lawyers, not through the press. Just us." Signed with both their names. Grayson's above Lila's. As if that mattered now. No mention of the lawsuit. No acknowledgement of the lies. No ownership of what they tried to take. Just soft words. Careful spacing. A tone polished by someone who had finally felt consequences. I folded the letter. Slid it back into the envelope. Sat there a moment. No emotion. No confusion. Just the weight of what had already happened. They had erased me from the obituary. Called me a dependent. Used my husband's name to fund vanity. Lied under oath. Laughed in court, and now reconcile. Not for me. For their own image, their own salvage. I sealed the envelope. No reply. No note. I walked to the mailbox. Slid it back in. Sent it straight to the address it came from. Let the silence do the talking. That evening, I turned off my phone. Turned off the porch light. Sat by the fire with a black notebook in my lap. Inside, I wrote only names. One per page. Each person who'd stayed quiet. Each one who had known but nodded along. It wasn't a list for revenge. It was a list for memory, because forgetting, that's what they counted on. I would not give them that. When the fire died down, I closed the notebook, placed it inside the top drawer. Then I opened the file marked Closure Motions, pending, and flipped to the first tab. I signed the papers in blue ink. 3 signatures. 2 initials. One line that changed the course of everything they thought they would inherit. Across the table, the board chair watched me carefully. "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm done holding it," I said. "Time to pass it where it matters." We sat in the same conference room where Robert once announced the Foundation's first expansion. Back then, Grayson had sat to my left checking his watch. Lila had shown up late. They weren't invited this time. I slid the file across the table. Inside the revised charter. The assets. The final transfer of control. Effective immediately, the Robert A. Morrell Foundation would no longer be run by family. It would be restructured as a grant for first-generation women in engineering. Robert always said he wanted the company to outlive him. He didn't say it had to live under his last name. The board chair read the clause aloud. Oversight shall be maintained by an independent council. No familial inheritance shall dictate disbursement or direction. One woman on the board smiled. "You just built something that can't be hijacked." I nodded. That was the point. We signed. Sealed it. Logged the vote. It was done. No ribbon, no applause. Just dignity. I walked out into the fall air, crisp and clean, pulled my coat tighter, drove home with the windows down, letting the silence settle into something steady. At home, I placed the last copy of the Foundation documents in a box labeled Legacy. Final. Not theirs. Mine. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, took down the old ceramic mug from the top shelf, the one Robert gave me before our first pitch meeting. Black letters, still legible. Build quiet. Own loud. I poured, sat at the table, listened to nothing. Then reached for the envelope marked courtroom, final ruling, and slid it open. I heard the car before I saw him. Engine idling too long, door closing slow, hesitant footsteps on gravel. I didn't move. Then the knock 3 taps. Not hard, not rushed, just enough to say I'm still here. I walked to the door. There he stood. Grayson. No camera crew. No suit. No Lila. He held nothing. Said nothing. Just looked at me, waiting. I didn't ask why he came. I didn't ask what he wanted. I just stood in the doorway, the same one he'd passed through for years, without ever truly seeing who stood behind it. He opened his mouth once. Closed it again. His eyes dropped, hands in pockets. I thought of the birthday he missed, the obituary without my name, the courtroom smirks, the forged letters, the quiet laughter behind closed doors. I also thought of the nights Robert stayed up worried he'd raised a man who mistook inheritance for effort, bloodline for character. He was here now, but it was too late. No word could stitch what he'd torn. No silence could buy back what he'd sold. I met his eyes, just for a second. Then I closed the door. No slam, no statement. Just the sound of wood returning to wood. He stood there for a while. I heard him shift. Step back. Then nothing. I walked to the table. Picked up the final court ruling. One sentence stood out. All claims dismissed with prejudice. Legal ownership confirmed. Trustee unchallenged. I set it down. Poured one more cup of coffee, then turned toward the shelf. I opened the curtains. Light spilled in slow, soft across the floorboards. The lake outside barely moved. Just breath. Just calm. I turned on the kettle, measured out the grounds, waited. No buzzing phone, no thick envelopes, no noise, just water and heat. The coffee poured dark, steady, familiar. I reached up to the second shelf, pulled down the mug, the old one. The white ceramic chipped at the rim, heavy in the hand. Set it on the table. Beside the photo, Robert and I standing in front of the first build site. Blueprints rolled in my arms, his hand on my shoulder. We looked tired and proud. The kind of proud that doesn't ask for applause. I sipped. Steam curled up slow. Across the room, the fire hadn't been lit in days. Didn't need to be. The cold had left. The folders were gone. The files filed. The calls done. The door stayed closed. And the mug, white, plain, worn, sat still. Still mine. I took another sip. Then I reached for a blank notepad, wrote the first line, Morel Women's Design Fellowship, Year 1, and kept writing.